The Jodi Arias case, a story told in court. In the early morning hours of June 4th, 2008, police in Mesa, Arizona discovered the body of a man inside his home. His name was Travis Alexander. He had been dead for several days. The discovery was not the result of a routine welfare check or a neighbor's report. It came after friends grew concerned when Travis failed to show up for scheduled commitments and could not be reached. When officers entered the house, they found signs that immediately suggested violence. Travis Alexander had suffered multiple stab wounds. His throat had been cut. He had also been shot. The scene was confined to a bathroom. There were no signs of forced entry into the home. From the beginning, investigators focused on people Travis knew. Travis Alexander was 30 years old. He lived alone and was described by friends as social, disciplined, and deeply involved in his religious community. He worked in sales and was known to be ambitious and goal-oriented. In the months before his death, Travis had been involved in a complicated relationship with a woman named Jodi Arias. Jodi Arias had met Travis in 2006 at a work-related event. Their relationship developed quickly. Friends later described it as intense, unstable, and marked by frequent conflict. The two had broken up and reconciled multiple times. After the relationship officially ended, they remained in contact. Phone records would later show hundreds of calls and messages exchanged between them. In the days leading up to June 4th, Travis had plans to travel. He was scheduled to leave for a trip with friends. When he failed to appear, concern grew. Friends went to his home. Inside, they found him in the bathroom. The condition of the body suggested that the attack had been prolonged. Investigators began reconstructing the final days of Travis Alexander's life. They reviewed phone records, emails, text messages. They examined who had last been in contact with him. Attention quickly turned to Jodi Arias. Jodi initially denied being in Mesa at the time of the killing. She told police that she had not seen Travis in months. She stated that she was elsewhere when the crime occurred. However, evidence soon contradicted these statements. Investigators obtained records showing that Jodi Arias had rented a car shortly before the killing. The mileage on the vehicle did not align with her claimed travel route. Cell phone data placed her in the vicinity of Travis Alexander's home around the time of his death. As police continued their investigation, they discovered something else. Inside the home, a digital camera was found. The memory card contained photographs taken on the day Travis was killed. The images showed Travis Alexander alive in the hours before his death. Later images documented the attack itself. These photographs would become central to the case. When confronted with this evidence, Jodi Arias changed her story. She admitted that she had been at Travis Alexander's home on the day of the killing. She claimed that the events unfolded during a sudden and violent confrontation. Over time, her account would change again. As investigators worked to piece together what happened inside that bathroom, the case began moving toward the courtroom. What started as a private relationship dispute became one of the most closely followed trials in the country. The details would be examined publicly. The statements would be compared, and a jury would be asked to determine what happened when two people, once closely connected, were alone together for the last time. As investigators examined the evidence more closely, the focus narrowed further on Jodi Arias. The digital camera recovered from the home became one of the most significant pieces of evidence in the case. Photographs stored on the memory card showed Travis Alexander in the hours before his death. Some images were ordinary. Others documented moments that occurred shortly before the attack. The final photographs captured a violent struggle. They showed Travis Alexander injured and attempting to defend himself. The timestamps on the images placed the events firmly on June 4, 2008. This evidence contradicted Jodi Arias' initial statements. When questioned again, she acknowledged being present at the home that day. Her explanation changed. She stated that the killing occurred in self-defense after an argument escalated unexpectedly. According to her account, she feared for her life. Investigators compared this version of events to the physical evidence. The number of injuries sustained by Travis Alexander was extensive. He had suffered dozens of stab wounds. His throat had been cut. A gunshot wound was also present. The nature of the injuries suggested a prolonged and forceful attack. Forensic analysts examined blood patterns in the bathroom. The evidence indicated movement during the struggle. There were no signs that Travis Alexander had initiated an attack. Investigators also examined Jodi Arias' movements after the killing. Records showed that she traveled away from Arizona shortly afterward. She disposed of items believed to be connected to the crime. She altered her appearance, including cutting and dyeing her hair. Phone records, receipts, and witness statements were used to reconstruct her travel. Each piece added to a growing timeline. As the case moved toward trial, prosecutors outlined their theory. They argued that Jodi Arias killed Travis Alexander intentionally and with premeditation. They pointed to the preparation involved in the trip to Arizona, the rental car, and the weapon used. They emphasized the photographs, which documented the events leading up to the killing. The defense presented a different narrative. They argued that the relationship between Jodi Arias and Travis Alexander had been volatile. They suggested that Jodi had been subjected to emotional and psychological pressure. They maintained that the killing occurred during a sudden confrontation, not as a planned act. The trial drew intense public attention. Courtroom proceedings were broadcast widely. Testimony was followed closely. Jurors heard from forensic experts, friends, family members, and law enforcement officers. Jodi Arias took the stand in her own defense. Her testimony lasted for days. She described the relationship in detail and offered explanations for her actions. Her credibility became a central issue. Prosecutors cross-examined her extensively. They challenged inconsistencies in her statements. They highlighted changes in her story over time. The jury was tasked with weighing physical evidence against personal testimony. After weeks of testimony, the case was submitted for deliberation. The verdict would determine how the evidence and narratives were ultimately interpreted. When the jury returned to the courtroom, the outcome reflected how the evidence had been weighed. Jodi Arias was found guilty of first-degree murder in the death of Travis Alexander. The verdict included findings of premeditation. In the penalty phase that followed, jurors were asked to decide between life imprisonment and the death penalty. After extended deliberations, the jury could not reach a unanimous decision on sentencing. The court later imposed a sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole. With that decision, the legal process came to an end. The case, however, did not fade quietly. Because so much of the trial had been televised, the details remained vivid in the public memory. The photographs, the testimony, the shifting explanations. For many observers, the most striking aspect of the case was not any single piece of evidence, but the contrast between versions of events. On one side was a timeline built from records, photographs, and forensic analysis. On the other was a personal account that changed over time. The jury's verdict reflected which narrative they found credible. For Travis Alexander's family and friends, the trial marked a point of finality. They had waited years for accountability. Though no legal outcome could restore what was lost, the verdict brought an end to uncertainty. The case also became an example frequently referenced in discussions about evidence. It demonstrated how digital records, travel data, and seemingly small details can combine to form a larger picture. It showed how contradictions are examined in court, and it illustrated how credibility can shape the interpretation of facts. At the same time, the case raised questions about privacy, media exposure, and the lasting impact of highly public trials. Long after the courtroom lights dimmed, the story continued to circulate. It appeared in documentaries, books, and discussions about criminal psychology and legal process. Yet beneath all of that analysis remains a simpler truth. Travis Alexander was a person with a life, routines, and plans. Those plans ended inside a bathroom in Mesa, Arizona, on a day that began like many others. The relationship that once connected two people became the center of a case that would be examined for years. Late at night, when stories like this are played quietly, the focus often shifts away from the courtroom and back to the human scale. How personal relationships change over time. How conflicts escalate. How moments that seem ordinary can lead to irreversible outcomes. The Jodi Arias case is remembered not because it lacks answers, but because the answers came through a process that unfolded slowly and publicly. It is a case shaped by documentation, contradiction, and deliberation. If you've listened through this story, you followed it from discovery to verdict, from private relationship to public record. If a detail stayed with you, or if something in the evidence stood out, you're welcome to reflect on it. Quiet consideration is often how cases like this remain understood beyond headlines. If this calm, late-night approach to true crime is something you return to, more documented cases will follow. There is no urgency, no dramatic close. Just another case, carefully examined as the night continues. Thank you for listening.